On August 30th, 1961, 9 students systematically changed the Atlanta public school system and the city of Atlanta forever. The result of their courage and active engagement was the integration of 4 of Atlanta's all-white high schools. In 1958, then Governor Ernest Vandiver, as did his predecessors, promised to maintain segregation in the state's public schools. In 1959, a federal court ordered Atlanta's segregated public school system to integrate immediately. There was a massive resistance, along with the threat to shut down the schools rather than integrate. Citizen groups advocated finding ways to desegregate so that public schools could stay open. A report from the governor's office allowed for minimal integration within the Supreme Court's decision. 133 African American students applied to transfer, 10 were accepted, but only 9 were allowed to transfer. On October 17, 2011, the Atlanta Board of Education honored 3 of the students to commemorate the 50th anniversary of school integration.
I do not consider myself a trailblazer. I consider myself someone who happened to have been at the right place at the right time and was blessed to be one of the individuals selected to attend. I didn't perceive the integration of the Atlanta public school as being integration so much as desegregation, because so few of us were allowed to go, and because of the process that we went through in order to be selected. So I was just blessed to be able to take exams very well.
In 1961, in a phenomenon that people have written lots of books about. The civil rights movement was just getting underway in full force. And quite frankly, my attitude was it was my task to take this on. There were other people who were doing other things. There were people who were, in fact, integrating the interstate carriers. They were doing the freedom rides. There were people who were sitting down at lunch counters. There were other people who, in fact, were integrating the state college system. Hamilton Holmes and Charlene Hunter were 2 students who were integrating the University of Georgia the same year that the 9 of us were integrating the Atlanta public schools. And so it was just part of what was going on, and this was a role that I could play. So I did not consider myself a trailblazer, just part of a team, really.
Do you consider yourself or describe yourself as a trailblazer?
No. When we went to take that test that day, it was my little group, and we were going to all go over to the white school, and we were going to make a difference. Unfortunately, I was the only good test taker, and my group was not, and so there I was alone.
The very first year, we went to school 15 minutes after school began. We got out 15 minutes before school was over. For the most part, our seats within the room were selected for us. There was very little, if any, interaction with our classmates.
A great part of the first year anyway. I don't remember exactly. We would be picked up by a City of Atlanta detective on the police force. And Madelyn and I would ride to Brown High School with police in front and police behind. And as Madelyn has indicated, we would arrive generally 15 minutes after classes had started. There were no students in the hallways. The school was quiet. We would go to class and then we would leave 15 minutes early. And the day depended on the students and the teachers. I had some teachers who were openly hostile, and I had other teachers who were very supportive. And the reaction of the students to me in a particular classroom just depended on the attitude of the teacher. And I was telling Rosalyn and Madelyn of one experience where in one class, the teacher allowed the students for the entire year, the first year, to push all of their desks away from me. And so I would be isolated in that classroom no matter where I chose to sit. The students in this other class that I attended started that on the first day, and the teacher looked up from her desk and looked at them and asked them, "Have you lost your mind? You get these desks back over here. We're not doing that in this classroom." I came to believe that those students were actually relieved that they did not have to play follow the leader. And in fact, it was, we became good friends in that classroom because it was the teacher versus us. She was a very tough taskmaster, and she brooked nothing. And you better have your homework done, and you better participate in class, and she treated us all the same. And from that first day on in that particular classroom, it was a very, very nurturing environment, because it was about education and it was not about making some statement. So it just depended, again, there were students who, for the most part, I think the students tolerated us. There were some who were openly hostile, and then there were some who were friendly and who had the courage to come up and actually be friends with us. But we had, as they say these days, we were all in. We had decided, I think all 9 of us had decided that this was something that we chose to do and that we were going to see it through. And so.
You might have had some spitballs or a few name calling coming down the hallway, but no physical confrontation or anything like that. When you go to the girls' bathroom, you could have some girls would be in there and they would talk to you, but out in the hallways they wouldn't say anything.
My experience with my teachers was quite varied. I had some teachers who were extremely gracious and very supportive, and I also had teachers who, by their demeanor and conduct, let me know that it was, and in fact verbally said to me, it was not their idea that I be in their class, and they were not pleased to have me.
So we didn't have very much confrontation going in or coming out, and anybody who was around the school were made to stay across the street. Nobody could come near the school. And everything else is a blur. I don't remember my teachers. I don't remember any of those things because I was there alone. I didn't have a partner like Madelyn and Thomas together. I was by myself. So it was a little harder for me. The other person who was at Murphy was in the 12th grade, so we saw each other going in and we saw each other coming out.
And when this process first began, we had individuals from the NAACP, from the local churches in the community that visited with us and said, "We are here to support you." So it was good having that support.
I think the biggest difference for me was the involvement of my parents and the parents of all my friends. They were very much involved in the education of the children at that point. If I decided I would cut the fool, and sometimes I could decide that, they would say to me, and this was from elementary school through Washington High School anyway, "Welch, I'll speak with your father," because they knew my father and they knew my mother. And that would pull me back, and I would certainly, in fact, get on the straight and narrow. I'm not so sure that that kind of phenomenon exists today. And whether it's black kids or white kids or mixed schools or whatever, I'm just not so sure that kind of involvement of parents closely with the teachers. They were in clubs together. They traded with one another in business. I'm not so sure that exists today, and I think to a certain extent the schools suffer because of that.
Well, we had a good support system. We had my family was very supportive, my church. We had support groups that we met with several times, and we had lots of support.
Did at any time you feel like giving up?
To be perfectly honest, no. But I say jokingly to friends now, I wasn't smart enough to realize that I should have. So it was full steam ahead and never even passed my mind.
Because of my family, because of neighbors, because of friends. I always had a very high opinion of black people. And so my sense of self-worth was intact. And so it was very difficult, and has been, and it always will be, difficult for someone to shake me because they want to make a point, and they're doing so out of hostility or out of prejudice or whatever. It just doesn't affect me. And so I was able to understand it and take it for what I thought it was, and not react. We, of course, had been coached that certain acts would probably take place, and that we shouldn't react, that we couldn't react, that it was very important to the successful integration of the Atlanta Public Schools that we not react to things like that. And of course, Madelyn made the point, and I think it's a very good point. This was not about integration the first year or the second year. It was desegregation, because there were so few of us. And but the success of the entire effort depended in large part on our reaction to people when they were going to do hostile things. And so we were very, very cognizant of that and did not react. It was an intellectual exercise for the most part.
For me, the only thing it did was it strengthened in me a lot of the values that I had been shown me. It built in me a greater compassion, patience. What I find now is that when I encounter people, if they are approaching me out of ignorance, I can work with you. We can grow together. If they approach me in bigotry, I don't have the time or the patience, because I'm not going to change your mind about who I am.
Or at least that I believe, is that most people would rather treat you civilly, in a civil fashion, as opposed to acting with incivility towards you. It reinforced for me what my parents had already told me, which is that most people are decent people. And the circumstances may dictate certain things, but if you scratch deep enough, if you look hard enough, you'll find decency in people. And I believe that to this day.
Made me stronger. I've been able to deal with a lot of things because of going through this opportunity.
Having gone to Brown High and spent 2 years where basically very few people, if any, spoke to me, when I graduated high school, I was looking forward to an African American experience. So I went to Spelman College. I graduated Spelman, and I went to Emory University Law School. I graduated Emory University Law School and got a master's in business administration from Fordham University. I then went into a corporate legal department, and from a corporate legal department I joined a law firm, rose to partner in the firm. So I would say it was good, all good.
Growing up in Atlanta, I had the opportunity to see successful black business people. And I've always been driven to by the belief that blacks as a group, African Americans as a group, needed to have the advantages that other people had. And one of those advantages that other people had that we as a group tended not to have was wealth. And so I, very early on, and I'm not sure why, maybe it was because of all of the businessmen that I worked for in the summers, they would come, and this is an aside, but they would come to my father, who ran a business on West Hunter Street, and ask my father to let me work for them that summer. And I worked for a number of businessmen, and that inculcated in me a sense that this is what we should do. We should do for ourselves. And so I have always been, or at least since a very early age, one who wanted to do for himself and for himself and for his family. And that's what has transpired. I've been fortunate enough over the years to be able to do that. I have my own business. I employ myself and have since 1983, and I'm very fortunate in that respect.
I attended Morris Brown College. I went to work for the IRS, and I was determined that even though they didn't have any not many African American managers there, I made it my mission to become a manager and rose to be a department head before I left. And I stayed there 37 years.
I'd say stick with it. And when I say stick with it, I mean the opportunities now depend upon one having an education. So no matter what the challenges are, just tell yourself tomorrow's a better day and keep moving forward, and you'll be rewarded accordingly.
My advice would be to draw the distinction between training and education. There was an old Yankee in New England who was speaking with a friend of mine who was a recent graduate of Harvard Law School, happened to be a black guy. And the Yankee, the white person who, and we say Yankee with a sense of admiration, because there's certain qualities that Yankees have that we admire. But he asked my friend, and where did you take your training? And by training he meant, where did you go to law school? And he said, I was at Harvard, I went to law school. And then he asked him, and where were you educated? He drew the distinction between training and education. And I think we're losing that distinction when I think we want to train people to be minions. But at any rate, my advice to students would be to make sure you understand the difference between being trained and being educated.
I would say get as much education as you can. It may be hard, but there are opportunities out there, there's money out there, and you just have to work hard to get it.
Pleased that people are recognizing us. The city of Atlanta very deliberately wanted to keep this low key when it did happen. They did not want another Little Rock. They did not want the kind of uproar and the hoopla. It was a very deliberate effort on their part. There was a lot of planning that took place. And in fact, one of the questions that was asked earlier was, well, were you surprised by anything? What surprised you? Well, the surprise is that there were no surprises, because in fact, from the superintendent of schools to the NAACP to the churches, people had thought about this long and hard about how to make this happen in Atlanta and not have it to be something that tore the community apart. And so I'm pleased that people are recognizing it. I had forgotten. I mean, when someone said it's 50 years, I was quite surprised. But I guess my basic answer is that I'm pleased.
These three people walked where very few of us will ever walk. not seeing themselves as trailblazers, but students who wanted an equal education.